I was working on a script about the Mark IV 427 family, the L72, the L88, the ZL1, the engine architecture that powers every big block Chevy story you've heard. And I kept running into a footnote that didn't fit. The L72 in 1966 wasn't the first 427 Chevrolet built. It was the third. In 1963, Chevrolet built 57 cars around a 427 cubic inch V8 the company would deny existed for the rest of the decade. The engine was buried so completely that when Chevrolet finally released a 427 to the public 3 years later, almost nobody noticed it was the second 427 they'd seen. The first one had been erased from the catalog, from the showroom, from the brochures, from most of corporate memory. Here's what I didn't see coming. The reason Chevrolet erased it wasn't the GM racing ban. The racing ban is the convenient story. The actual reason is uglier. By the time the 57 cars rolled out of Flint, Michigan, the engine inside them was already obsolete. Chevrolet's own engineers had moved on. In a different building, in a different program, a different 427 was already being bolted to a different block. The customers who paid for those 57 cars didn't know this. They thought they were buying the future. They were buying a museum piece. This is the story of the Z11. Most of what I'm about to tell you is in GM's own production records. The interesting part is what was happening in a different building at GM at the same time. Start in 1962, Chevrolet has a problem, Pontiac's running the 421 Super Duty, Chrysler's got the 413 Max Wedge, and is months from launching the 426. Ford's fielding the 406, and is about to release the 427 FE side oiler. Every one of these engines is bigger than Chevrolet's biggest production, V8, the 409, which is a stretched version of an even older engine called the 348, originally designed in 1958 for trucks. By 1962, the architecture is 5 years old, and Chevrolet's competitors are beating it on raw cubic inches. Chevrolet's engineers had two answers. They were running both at the same time. Answer 1 was a stretched 409, same 4.3 125-inch bore, stroke lengthened from 3.50 inches to 3.65 inches. Compression pushed to 13.5 to 1. A two-piece aluminum high-rise intake bolted on top with dual Carter 4 barrels. The engine displaced 427 cubic inches, factory rated at 430 horsepower. Actual dyno output, according to Hemmings reporting cited by Hot Cars, was somewhere between 480 and 525 horsepower. This was the engine that went into the Z11 cars. Answer 2 was a clean sheet design, new block, new combustion chambers, canted valves at compound angles, conventional 90-degree decks instead of the W block's awkward 16-degree decks, same bore spacing as the 409, but otherwise a different engine architecture entirely. Chevrolet's engineers called it the Mark II. The press, when they finally caught a glimpse of it at Daytona, called it the mystery motor. Both engines went into 1963 race programs at the same time. The Z11 went to drag racers. The Mark II went to NASCAR. Both were running by January 1963. Here's why it matters. The Z11 was the W block lineage, a long-stroke version of an architecture from 1958. The Mark II was the Mark IV's prototype, the architecture that would become every Chevy big block from 1965 to 1990. The L72, the L88, the ZL1, the LS6454. In December 1962, when the Flint assembly plant began building Z11 cars, the Tonawanda engine plant was already casting Mark II blocks for the NASCAR program. Same company, different buildings, different engines, both wearing the number 427. The customers who paid $1,245 for the RPOZ11 option didn't know this. The Z11 cars were built in 3 batches, according to Hagerty's production records, 25 on December 1st, 1962, 25 on January 1st, 1963, 7 more later that month, all assembled in Flint, Michigan, at the plant now known as the GM Flint Metal Center. Total production, 57 cars. Each car got the aluminum front end, fenders, hood, inner fenders, bumper. The interior was stripped, no radio, no heater, no sound deadening, no front sway bar. The brakes came off the lightweight Z06 Corvette road racing parts bin. The transmission was a Borg-Warner T10 4-speed with an aluminum tail housing. The rear differential was an aluminum-cased posi traction with a 4.11-to-1 final drive on most cars. Curb weight, 3,405 pounds. About 300 pounds lighter than a stock Impala Sport Coupe. The engineering specifics matter here because they tell you what Chevrolet was actually optimizing. According to Hot Cars reporting, the Z11 head castings were taller than the standard 409 heads, which let Chevrolet engineer a straighter port path from the intake runner directly to the combustion chamber. The water pump was aluminum. The oil pan was a high-capacity unit, not the production 409 pan, because high RPM drag used choose oil hard enough to starve a stock pump. The dual quad intake was a two-piece aluminum casting with a high-rise plenum. The air cleaner was a unique stamped aluminum housing that drew air from the passenger side cowl vent. These weren't badge engineering mods. The Z11 was a serious factory racing engine. It was also the last serious work anyone did on the W block lineage. Chevrolet didn't sell the cars to walk-in customers. According to Overdrive magazine, the cars went to established racers with a record of success with 1961 and 1962 409-engined cars. Dave Strickler got one, Butch Leal got one, Hubert Platt got one, Hayden Proffitt, who had won the 1962 NHRAUS Nationals, got one. Ronnie Mr. 4-Speed Sox got one. Sahara Hotel sponsored a silver car driven by Ron Campbell and Frank Saunders out of Gregor Chevrolet in Paramount, California. They called it the Gray Ghost. Strickler ran 12.20 second quarter miles right out of the box. He won stock eliminator at the 1963 NHRA Winter Nationals in February. The cars were doing what Chevrolet built them to do. There's a number I keep coming back to: 25, 25, 7. That's the production schedule for the Z11 cars at Flint. 25 built on December 1st, 1962, 25 built on January 1st, 1963, 7 more built later that month. Then the line stopped. By the time the 7 were finished, GM Chairman Frederick Donner had issued the memo that killed every factory racing program at General Motors. Pontiac's Super Duty program, Chevrolet's Mystery Motor program, the Z11 program, all of it. The 1957 Automotive Manufacturers Association ban on factory racing, which GM had been quietly ignoring for 6 years, was suddenly the official corporate position again. The men who built those last 7 cars in Flint were finishing a production run nobody upstairs intended to support. The 1963 Daytona 500 was held on February 24th. Chevrolet sent 2 mystery motor cars to the qualifying races prepared by Mickey Thompson. Junior Johnson won his 100-lap qualifier. Johnny Rutherford won his. The mystery motor was running at 165 miles per hour in qualifying, faster than anything Ford or Chrysler could field. In the actual 500, both mystery motors broke, ignition trouble on one, engine teething on the other. Ford swept the podium. Rutherford finished 9th, the best Chevy result of the day. That was the only NASCAR race the mystery motor ever ran. Donner's memo had already taken effect. Chevrolet's factory program was over before the season started. The Z11 cars kept racing. The drag classes were less politically visible than NASCAR, so Chevrolet stopped supplying parts but didn't recall the cars. Strickler, Sox, Leal, and the others kept running them through 1963 and 1964. The Sahara Hotel Gray Ghost ran consistent 12.20 second quarter miles for 2 more seasons. But the engineering future of Chevrolet performance wasn't in those cars. I used to think the Z11 was Chevy's failed answer to Ford's 427. I don't think that anymore. The Z11 was Chevy's failed answer to its own simultaneous engineering project. Here's what Chevrolet didn't tell the 57 Z11 buyers. The Mark II mystery motor that broke at Daytona wasn't a one-off. It was a prototype. Every engineering decision in the Mark II, the canted valves, the 90-degree decks, the hemispherical-style combustion chambers, the bore spacing, was a preview of the engine Chevrolet would put into production 2 years later as the Mark IV 396 in 1965, and 1 year after that, in 1966, as the Mark IV 427. When Chevrolet introduced the L72 427, in 1966 and called it the turbojet, they didn't mention there'd been an earlier 427. They didn't mention the Z11. They didn't mention the Mark II. They presented the L72 as if it were the first 427 Chevy ever made. It wasn't. It was the third. The first one was the Z11W block, 57 cars, architecture from 1958, already obsolete in December 1962. The second was the Mark II mystery motor, built in tiny numbers for the 1963 NASCAR program, killed by the Donner memo before it ran more than one race. The third was the Mark IV L72, the production engine, the one Chevrolet would build for the next 25 years. Two of those engines never officially existed in Chevrolet's product literature. The Z11 got a single line in the 1963 RPO chart and was gone by 1964. The Mark II mystery motor was never sold to the public at all. By the time the L72 launched in 1966, Chevrolet had 3 years of corporate distance from the cars at Daytona and the cars at Flint, and the marketing department behaved as if neither program had happened. The 57 Z11 customers had bought cars that Chevrolet would soon pretend it didn't build. This is what makes the Z11 different from the famous rear engine stories. The L88 was officially a Corvette option. The ZL1 Camaro was officially a Copo order. The 427 SOHC at Ford was at least admitted to exist before NASCAR banned it. The Z11 had a stranger fate. It was the only one of these engines whose own manufacturer treated it, retrospectively, as a clerical error. The cars themselves are now worth more than the houses most of them were sold from. A Z11 sold for $577,000 at Mecum Kissimmee in 2017. The original Old Reliable Mule, the first Z11 built, won 90% of its drag strip starts in 1963 and 1964, and is now a 6-figure museum piece. Estimates suggest fewer than 10 of the 57 survive in running condition. The cowl induction air cleaners, that thin aluminum stamping unique to the Z11, sell for $40,000 by themselves when they surface. The architecture that beat the Z11, the Mark II mystery motor, isn't in any museum. It went to Daytona, broke twice, and disappeared into the prototype lineage of the Mark IV. You can buy a Mark IV 454 crate engine from GM Performance today. You can't buy a Mark II. The engine that lost the race against the Mark II became an engine you'll find on a junkyard pallet. The engine that won the race against the Z11 became the architecture in every COPO Camaro, every L88 Corvette, every LS6 Chevelle, every ZL1, and every modern LS platform descendant. The story Chevrolet told about its 1960s performance program, the one where the L72 in the 1966 Corvette is the first chapter, has a hole in it that the Z11 fills. 57 cars built around an engine the company knew was already finished, bought by drivers who didn't know they were funding a dead architecture, killed by a corporate memo that didn't even mention them by name, and then quietly removed from the brochures so completely that for years a Chevrolet historian could plausibly claim the 1966 L72 was the first 427 Chevrolet ever built and not get corrected. The Z11 wasn't the engine Chevrolet wanted. The Z11 was the engine Chevrolet had ready. The Mark II mystery motor was the engine Chevrolet wanted, and the Mark II is the engine that won, even though it lost every race it entered, because it became the architecture that won every race after it for the next 30 years.